welcome back to the Doormat Mom No More podcast. I'm Doormat Mom, and today we have a very special guest, and I have him on because I fell in love with his videos on Instagram. Carl Knickerbocker is an attorney, and he speaks a great deal about co-parenting with a narcissist. And given this podcast is all about parent-child estrangement, part of that epidemic is parent alienation, unfortunately. When people go through divorce and children are involved, it's not uncommon that I've learned where there's parent alienation from one side to the other. And within that sphere can be co-parenting with a narcissist. And so I wanted to have him explain how he began to address this through his videos, share a little bit about him as an attorney, discuss some of his books, and ask him some questions that maybe you want to know if you're dealing with this in your own life. First, I'm gonna share an Instagram video that not only did I watch it say, oh my gosh, I was actually laughing because it's what he's saying is so true. So let me go over to the video and we'll bring it up. Actually, before I do that, make sure we have it on camera. Okay, we're going to do this now.
For the truly narcissistic co-parent, effective co-parenting is an all and nothing dynamic, meaning they get to make all the decisions. They have all the rights. They have the final say. They should have as much time as they want, and they should be able to just mete that out to you if and when they want to. They are the ones with the final say on everything. They are the decision makers. They are the definition of what is best for the child. You, on the other hand, get to accommodate their requests. You should never say no. You should be secondary to all of their plans and all of their desires. You should always know your place. And of course, you should praise them. You should give them all the credit. All of the successes for the children is because of them. Any of the failures or struggles are because of you. You should always make sure you're clear on your position, which is beneath them. And if you're lucky, you should get to pay as much as possible through the entire experience.
I'm certain that speaks to so many of you. I am certain of it. It spoke to me. And unbelievable, right? But that's reality when you're dealing with co-parenting with a narcissistic co-parent. So let's bring Carl on. Oh my gosh. How many takes did that take you to do, by the way? That was wild.
Oh, just a couple.
Carl, you nailed it. You nail it all the time. But that just spoke to me because I've heard these stories. And you know what? I've also, I have to say, I've lived that too. So, but let's go back. Let's talk about why you decided to concentrate on this area, and tell us about your practice. Tell us where you practice, and bring us up to speed on the totality of Carl Knickerbocker.
Oh gosh.
Work. Come on, we got to know.
All right. Well, I practice primarily in Central Texas in the Austin area. I practice family law, but then my coaching and my consulting is nationwide. I also have some international clients with all that in the Netherlands, South Africa, other areas. And so really getting into the focus on the whole narcissistic parent thing, or the narcissistic co-parent, is as I was developing the early platform, I was just, sharing some of my personal stories of, hey, I've experienced this, I've experienced that. And hundreds and then thousands of people would reply back, "You're describing my experience. You're describing exactly what I have gone through. It's like you're a fly on the wall describing my ex." And just noticing very early on just how common and ubiquitous these experiences were really cued me in that this was something to focus on and just go very, very deep on as a topic, because it just seems to be this thing that so many people are universally experiencing. So that's kind of how I got into that corner of things,
Mm-hmm.
mostly with
Mm-hmm.
describing my own experiences and things that I had lived through and on the receiving end of. But then, especially getting into the legal practice side, just noticing just time after time after time after time where these clients of mine are just dealing with carbon copy exes, and they all behave these same ways. And the only way to really describe it is in terms of these very narcissistic and rather disordered individuals.
So let's talk about how to co-parent with a narcissist, because
Don't.
yeah, I knew you were going to say that. Okay, you don't. Yes. So, and you wrote a book.
How do you not break your leg while skiing? You don't go skiing.
You
I
don't
mean,
go
it's just
skiing. But what
yeah,
if you're forced to co-parent with them? Because the court, the court is not going to say, well, because you're a narcissist, your husband's a narcissist, your wife's a narcissist, you get to opt out of this and just take the kids and run. That's not happening. And so many parents are forced to co-parent. And you wrote a book, parallel parenting
yep.
solution, is that I read? That's one of many books. I'm going to bring up. Let me just flash this on the screen for the moment. He's got several books, all available on Amazon, all really great reads, and all applicable to specific situations within this realm that you deal with. So please look that up. Look them up on Amazon, buy those books. You'll be happy you did. But talk about parallel parenting then. How do you do this? Like how does that work? Especially given
So,
that video.
right, right. So kind of the premise behind parallel parenting is that idea that the other parent's home is their home and your home is your home. And when you're dealing with somebody who, isn't interested in collaborating, where like a fluid co-parenting relationship just is not possible, and that could be because of severe mental health issues, personality disorders. That could be because of domestic violence histories. That could be because of alcohol and addiction issues. There are all sorts of reasons why co-parenting just in a trendy, I use that term trendy, or in a trendy, in a traditional, very collaborative sense is just impossible.
Right.
What you do is have to change your paradigm and start looking at things in terms of parallel parenting, which the concept of parallel lines, parallel homes, there are these things that run on their own tracks and then never cross each other. That's kind of the definition of the parallel line. Um, and so just you focus as much as you can on your home, your boundaries, your safe space, your way of doing things. And as much as possible, allow the other parent that space to just do their own thing. And unless it is something that is vitally important where you have to mutually address it or try to address it regarding the child, major educational decisions, psychological, psychiatric issues, invasive medical issues, highly important things like that, unless it's something that requires mutual agreement, or there is a very, very severe concerning issue that requires your intervention for the protection and safety of the child, you just take the Vegas rule. What happens over there is what happens over there. And you just view your own home the same way, that what we do here, this is our safe space, and we're not going to have crossover. So that's kind of a very basic foundational view of what drives parallel parenting.
And how does that work in reality? And I ask this because when one parent is life, when one parent's life or personality drips over into your home. For instance, you, by example, you just had a great time with your child. You just went on this great trip, and your narcissistic co-parent person knows this. You come home, you barely get off the plane, and you get this terrible, like just grating, demanding letter. How do you adopt a personality where you just let it slide off your back? Like, yeah, you okay? I just realized he's just pissed that this has happened. And how do you get to that point? Because it's really hard when they drip over intentionally to ruin your time because they're not having that time with their own child.
Yep. That's a classic example where you have the good time and then they have to try to reach into your space and provoke you. They want you to get upset. They want to punish you for that. They will come back with all manner of just false accusations. Or I think I had a video about, the moment you drop the child off, then they're like, did you only feed them ice cream all weekend? And
Yeah.
I mean, they just make stuff up.
Right.
And the intention behind that is now they're just dumping all sorts of stress and anxiety and everything else on you. They don't care about the actual response. They just want to create chaos. And they might do this at the end of your visit. They may do it at the beginning of your visit. Either way, they just want you to have to be devoting your time, your mental energy, everything else to dealing with them rather than enjoying your own life. So to get to your question though of, how do you develop these things? One, sometimes it just takes time. And so a lot of practice, a lot of trial and error, a lot of, messages you wish you never sent. And it just takes that time to build up the skills of how to not only receive the messages, but kind of find your own voice and your own routine on how to respond to them. And so a lot of it, I believe, goes back to just developing that good sense of confidence in yourself, where you're able to look at just yourself, what you're doing, and be able to say, I am in compliance with the orders. I am doing the things that I'm supposed to do, and I'm doing them very well. And as far as parenting goes, I'm doing a great job with the kid. And I'm giving them everything they need and love and support. And I can look at my side of the ledger and I can be proud of everything that I'm doing. And so you get that sense of confidence in your own parenting where you're like, they can throw whatever they want at me, but I know I'm doing a great job. I know I don't have a legal threat because of my compliance. And I know that I am treating the child with utmost respect and love and compassion and giving them everything that they need. So I am proud of my parenting. That's a major, major part of it. Another part of it is, developing that sense of humor. And usually you develop that sense of humor through education, where you start to be able to see this is the game this person plays. And not only is it a game that this person plays, but it's this same kind of cliche, cheesy game that so many thousands of these exes all do. And I swear they have a playbook. I swear they have a script that they all follow. And they must have some just horrible, nasty Facebook group or something where they just share all these notes and they all do these same behaviors. And the more you can just educate yourself on these are the dynamics, these are the patterns, and then come up with ways to change your relationship to what they're doing, and especially do it in a way that you find at least some amusement and humor in it. So I think I had another video where it's like they send that note and it's just like, oh, the piggy's hungry. Or, and that comes from the whole concept of don't cast your pearls before swine.
Right.
And so it's like, don't waste your time and don't waste your efforts. Don't take what is good within yourself and throw it in front of somebody who's just going to tear it apart and stomp on it and not care. So when you see it, it's just like, oh, look, the piggy's hungry. Or it's just like, oh, they're thirsty for attention. Or it's like, of course, there it is. Or maybe you have a bet with your, new significant other or something. It's like, I bet you within 15 minutes, I'm going to get a nastygram. There it is. Oh, sure.
You make it sort
You
of
know,
like a game.
yeah, and you have to for your own sanity.
Yeah.
And the point behind that is not to trivialize what's really going on, it's to change your relationship to it. And so instead of being this thing that you open it up and you're like, oh my gosh, the voice of the evil one is going to be, speaking to me through my phone or computer or something. Instead, you take control of the narrative from your side and you view it the way you want and you engage it the way you want on your terms. And that's going to just take a lot of the barbs and the thorns out of it when you experience it. So there's that. The last little part, long answer, but mentorship is huge. And so when you can connect with people who do have healthy skills for dealing with people like this, and maybe it's a coach, maybe it's somebody you consult, maybe it's somebody who's just been through it that you know from church or the community or some group or support group or something, the more you can tap into somebody else's example of having that healthy relationship to a high conflict person and then empathize with their experience, that teaches you some of those internal skills on how to better relate to it. So I think those are some of the big pillars on how to best handle those communications.
I see that in my own group, honestly. The
Yeah.
people sharing their knowledge, sharing their experiences, and learning from each other, and just actually also gaining a bit of comfort that they're not alone in dealing with this, because it's very stressful to deal with a narcissistic co-parent, especially when you hit those moments where, and in essence, you're not feeding the piggy, and although you've detached and now they escalate it. And I've seen this too, where they'll escalate it. And as you pointed out in so many of your videos, they're not purveyors of the truth many times. And so they'll concoct stories and they'll grasp at any possibility to reinterpret something in order to create their own platform to then move you into some sort of court situation. And that happens too. And what's frustrating I see with all of that is that the other parent then gets dragged into paying for that, what I would consider a temper tantrum. And regardless of, how, as you point out in many of your videos too, regardless of how nice you can be, how much you can give, that moment of nicety is not going to make a difference to them. They'll still drag you into court if, in fact, they decide that, things aren't as they would like them to be. You're not, in essence, working for them. You're not being subservient. So talk to us about that moment when, a husband or ex-husband or ex-wife gets that note and says, hey, you're going to court because this, that, and you're saying, but I sent the picture proactively just to show you that, so-and-so was playing football, and then you used it against me because of XYZ?
Yeah.
Common, right? Common. So explain, what do you do in court when that situation happens, and how much can you continue to pay for the temper tantrums?
Right. Excellent question. And I see this all the time in practice where people get dragged back to court on completely just baseless issues. And usually the best protection against that, it's kind of the ounce of prevention equals a pound of cure sort of thing, where you have your ducks in a row and what you've been doing, you've been in compliance, the order that governs your situation inside and out, and you're doing what you're supposed to do. And that you have, perhaps supporting documentation if you need it, or at least you have a good, clear awareness of your own compliance. So when that thing comes, you can look at it and say, well, there they go again, and they're going to spin off and have all of these allegations and, kind of false narratives and just making stuff up to try to modify or enforce. But I know they're going to run up against, this brick wall that is my compliance. And a lot of times it helps to have a good, clear understanding of what the legal standards are for your case. If they're trying to modify, you know, has there really been this substantial and material change in the circumstances of the children that would actually warrant a modification? And when you can say, I think I've really got the law on my side, I know from my compliance, I've got the facts on my side, then you just want to engage it on the bare minimum basis possible in the court system. And so a lot of times it helps to have an attorney who can come into that space and just say, you know what? I don't think they really have a case. And I see where your evidence shows your compliance, and I can see where the standards of what the court is expecting, they haven't reached that benchmark. We're just going to file a denial and do nothing and just your side as streamlined as possible. And so I see this all the time in practice where the other side will be spinning off and trying to, ramp up this big enforcement case or some sort of modification case. And we'll go all the way to, a trial or a hearing, and they'll get blown out of the water because they don't have evidence. They don't have a case. They don't have anything they can really present effectively to the court. And they end up losing. And their bill is $50,000, $60,000. And then my bill is like this big over on the other side. And it's like, well, it's because we didn't play into the game of ramping up a whole court case based on these fictions. We didn't join it as a mutual fiction. We just said no. And we just stopped. So if you can find attorneys who practice kind of on that level, that instead of saying, well, if they filed against you, let's file against them, instead just say, hey, they don't have a case. I don't think you do either. We're just going to file a denial, just stay our ground. And when they lose, we're going to ask them to reimburse, your little bit of attorney fees and let them go eat the loss. And so.
Smart, very smart, very smart. So good attorney. That's the answer. Yeah. Good attorney.
Good attorney. Or I have to say, I've seen a lot of people come into court and operate on the pro se level. I don't typically endorse this, but there are some. I've seen a good number of people who go in, and even pro se, they do a heck of a lot better job than a lot of these family law attorneys. And the key is they are educated and streamlined. Usually they have a consultant behind them, which can be a really great asset. Just somebody who teaches them, this is what you want to do. This is how you present it. These are the strengths of your case. These are the weaknesses. And so they have kind of that conciliary sort of thing, or they have the advisor, the consultant who helps them outline things and then just teach them to go simply effectively execute it. So I've seen that be very, very effective. I've also seen the flip side where both people with lawyers and without just have complete train wrecks. So the key is just making sure, again, you really understand the law. You don't spin off into things that aren't supported by law and things that aren't supported by the facts. Keep yourself in very, very clear compliance and be able to just show the court, look, I've done everything right. The things haven't changed. What they're alleging, that's just not true. They don't have evidence. And, the judge should be able to see through that with a clear presentation and toss that out.
And you mentioned not to get triggered into playing the game so that you go against your orders. That's really important. So explain that too.
Oh, that's huge. One of the things that I fortunately see in cases, and some of my own clients, is they'll say, well, if they get to break the order and they're doing this and they're doing that, therefore I should get to, break the order too. And they'll take the other side's kind of naughtiness as, their golden ticket to do, their own, liberal interpretation of the order, or
Right.
just outright defiance of it. And all that you've done at that point is just level the playing field at your ex's low level.
Right.
And so many times it's, people who would otherwise have a very, very good case, or a case where I could, accomplish really, really good things for them. The number one thing that hinders their case, or sometimes outright destroys their position or case, is when they choose to not maintain the high ground. They get baited into equal bad behavior. They lash out, they, defy the order, they decide that they know better than everyone else, and it's just they go down a bad path. And so as long as you can really stay that course, not get pulled into playing their low level games, most of the time you can maintain a very, very impeccable case and have a lot of success in court.
That's good advice. Now, here's a question. What happens when the child matures
Mhm.
and the child, they're getting into, driving age, or getting into like all that's going on, and they've decided, all of a sudden they're saying, well, I don't want to go this weekend. I don't want to, or I don't like my time with the other party.
Yeah.
And then the other party throws that in your lap and says, well, you're the problem. When it's really the child has had, has moved into a bit of autonomy on that child's, young adult, how do you navigate that? Because that's happening. I'm seeing that on the side of one particular friend that's dealing with, that's decided, well, in this case, he said, well, I'm just backing off, and the child will come around. And then but I'm also seeing it on the side of a parent like, yeah, that's in your lap, and now that you and I have a problem.
Yeah.
But when the child has actually matured into maybe realizing the surroundings, saying, I don't really like to be here, or I don't really want to go here, or my life is now taking over a bit. What do you
Yeah.
do when you're dealing with a narcissistic co-parent?
Yeah. Well, there's kind of two different views of that. So the one you described, where it sounds like maybe a dad is just saying, you know what, I'm going to respect that position and I'm going to provide space there. That's one of the wisest things you can do. Especially when you get into the, 16, 17-year-old range, you're talking about this much of childhood, whatever that means, that much of childhood left. And what I always will counsel people to do when I have them as, coaching clients and we're dealing with similar matters, is that, we'll start reframing the child into the concept of the young adult. And we're going to start looking at the relationship more from the perspective of, what do I want the rest of my life relationship with this person, this young adult, to look like? And start living as if they are already there. And so that might be, you know what? I'm going to respect their opinion and their need for space. And I'm going to be continuously here with compassion and availability. And I'll check in and we'll have conversations. But you start treating it almost no differently, as if, they go off to college for a while. They go off and they're going to, live in another country for a while and kind of do their own thing. And then you just expect that, the little bird will most likely come back to the nest and touch in now and then, but you start treating them as if they have that capacity to make those bigger decisions. Because I mean, practically, and some of the local judges will talk about this, you have a 16 or 17-year-old, what are you going to do? It's like, you're not going to drag them into the car, you're not going to hog tie them, you're not going to any of these things. It's not going to be effective. And if you start fighting back really hard on it, all you're going to do is cause an even larger rupture. And you're going to be perhaps even feeding into this very toxic narrative. If there is kind of a background toxic narrative going on, the more you fight against it, you might actually be playing into kind of the sinister hand.
Right.
On the other side of things, if the other parent is saying, "Oh, well, little Susie wants to spend more time with you, and that's because you're the great manipulator and alienating this 17-year-old who doesn't like that I ignore her all weekend," and whatever the real case may be, just kind of like, okay, hey Susie, it's really important for you to comply with the order, but obviously you're bigger than I am, and I'm not going to get you into the car. And it's just like, or some of these ridiculous cases where it's like the son is like, "Hey, I don't want to go over to the other house," and dude's like 6'2", and he's like big kids. It's like, what are you going to do with that? You can't barely even fit the kid in the car, let alone try to wrestle him into it. And so you just say, all right, well, I've tried everything, I've explained it. You let the other side know, hey, here's what's going on. I encourage y'all to talk. Why don't y'all go and like see if you can talk to somebody together to maybe work out some of these issues? And if the other side is pitching all sorts of fits and starting to use the alienation language, which, I mean, that kind of loses its
Yeah.
effectiveness when the child gets older. Maybe if the kid is 16, 15, somewhere in that range, you check your local laws or your state laws, and if there is a mechanism where the child can speak to the judge to have their wishes and perspectives made known to the judge, and could perhaps inform some sort of slight modification, then file that and pursue that. And that's a good protective measure.
Right.
Meanwhile, you're encouraging everything possible. Hey, let's try to work on this. I encourage you to go. I don't want to be found non-compliant.
Right.
I am encouraging you to do that. And as long as you're checking all the boxes, if the kid still doesn't want to go, then what are you going to do?
Yeah. Well, I think that, any parent who is a good parent will always encourage the child to have a relationship with the other parent. But in the case where that's just not possible because the child is saying no for X, Y, Z, I mean, obviously you continue to follow your orders, but you, like you said, you can't throw the child in the car. Before you know it, if you even try, the police are going to be up here and Harvey said you can't do that. Right? So I mean, it becomes a frustrating thing. But as you pointed out, as well, sometimes these narcissistic co-parents won't concern themselves with what's best for the child or what the child is saying, and they're more apt to focus on their own wants and their own strategy. And what I've heard that does, in many cases, is it brings added stress into the home. And now the child is old enough to recognize where that stress is coming from, and it only aggravates and compels that child, that young adult, to not want to go even more.
Yeah, many times. And what I've noticed over and over and over again is that when clients are really having, that conflict, when they're on the receiving end of that, and the kid is like, "No, I want to be over at the other parent's house. I don't want to be over at your house. There are things that I don't like, rules I don't like, this, that, whatever else." That the more you fight against them, again, you feed into that narrative.
Right.
Oh, look, see, everything I said, you're trying to keep me from being an adult. You're not respecting my autonomy. You're not this, you're not that. But the moment you're like, okay,
Right. Right.
and they're like, "What? But wait, we're supposed to fight." No, we're not going to fight. You're a big boy, you're a big girl. If that's what you want, okay, I'm going to support it. Doors open, when dinner is. Let's talk about things. We can come up with some new ways of, relating. Let's go out for pizza. You start like redefining things on more of the adult terms, and you just kind of really back off with any of the pressure or expectation. All of a sudden, after, not all of a sudden, but maybe after like a month or a couple months pass by, and then the kid's like, hey, you want to go hang out? You want to go do this? You want to go do that? And the relationship evolves into something very, very healthy but
Right.
different.
Right.
I would say there is a sliding scale, because we are talking very specifically about kind of like the 16, 17-year-olds, kind of the about ready to launch. The same things do not apply to the 3-year-old or the
So talk
4 or
about, yeah.
5-year-old.
So
Right.
talk about that. Talk about that situation, the younger child. How do you deal with that same situation?
Pick them up and put them in the car.
Okay.
A lot of times it's just like, no, I don't want to go. It's like, great, I wouldn't want to either. Get your butt in the car. And so, I mean, sometimes you just have to do that. It's very dangerous when we start being like, oh, but little Susie Snowflake at 4 years old has, just cosmic say of anything and everything she wants. Well, especially the local judges here are like, nope, that does not fly. That's a 4-year-old, and you're the parent, and that kid needs to go where they need to go. And a lot of, especially Texas, local judges here, if that kid is 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, in a lot of cases, they're like, no, you need to be doing everything in your reasonable power to make sure that that child goes with the other parent and complies with the order. If there's really a significant issue at play where that child going would, cause harm to that child, then we expect that there would actually be evidence of that such that a modification would be warranted. In the absence of that, Susie goes to the other house. Little Timmy has to go, and your job as a parent is to make that happen. But a lot of people get in trouble because they'll take that very passive position, and they'll just say, oh, well, I'm not going to make them. I'm going to let them do whatever they want. They're their own free little spirit, and I'm not going to blah, blah, blah. And that does not fly. That's just being kind of apathetic for your own benefit. And the judges, you typically will see straight through that tactic and will a lot of times come down very, very harshly on the parent who's taken that very laissez-faire approach to the child. Usually you would notice when the shoe changes to the other foot, and if that same laissez-faire parent was on the receiving end of the child not wanting to come, guess what? They'd be filing all sorts of stuff and trying to enforce it. So it's only typically when it's to their benefit do they take I'm powerless here. I'm helpless. I can't make the child go. It's like, really? They're 30 pounds. Pick them up and put them in the
I was going to say. So I think what we learned here is communication, compliance, and if you can pick them up and put them in the car, you do it. Otherwise, can try to convince them to go, and if they can't, that's a whole other ball game.
Yeah. So, or you better make sure you have some clearly articulated consequences for the child. So if the kid is just a lot of times, if the kid is really just wanting to hang out because they want the iPad or they want some sort of experience, it should be, if you are pitching a fit and you're not getting in that car, you are going on, the austerity budget over here as far as what your experiences are going to be. There will be consequences. You don't get to, claim refugee status over here at this house with no real reason and expect all of the luxuries and all the benefits of here. It's like, no iPad, no this, no that. It's going to be very boring. You're not getting your ice cream because you're not doing what you're supposed to do, and you're not listening to me and getting in the car the way you're supposed to. I'm the parent, you're the child. These are your consequences. And a lot of times that'll cure it.
I think that's a great spin, by the way, to add to it. You're not listening to me beyond just the other parent. So now there's almost like you put a unity a tie between the parents, that it still exists, and that we
Right.
have to work together to get you to have that relationship. That's great. Let's talk about something that's sort of like an offshoot of all this.
Okay.
Okay. Grandkids. Okay.
Yep.
Grandkids, and how that all plays in, because I know there's a lot of issues with grandparents seeing their grandkids, being able to access grandkids. Some are asking about grandparents' rights.
Yep.
Let's talk about all that. Put it right squarely on your lap.
Yep. That's one of those really, really difficult issues. Laws vary by state. Um, in a lot of, Texas, for instance, and a lot of states, the concept of grandparents' rights is very narrowly defined, and you have to have certain care standards. Maybe they've had possession of the child exclusively for a while. Um, things like that, where they could perhaps file for some sort of guardianship or some sort of conservatorship rights. Those tend to be fairly rare, and that's usually where grandparents have basically been raising the child for a while, and then it's the parent who wants to come back in the picture, and the grandparents are like, nope, mine, and they have to file something. Or sometimes very, very toxic, dangerous situations where maybe both parents or one parent is not able to, care for the child because of health issues, addiction issues, whatever have you, violence issues. And sometimes the grandparents can try to intervene into the case to say, hey, we could be the supervisors, we could be this, we want to have at least some sort of presence here. And sometimes the courts will find ways to be able to shoehorn grandparents in some of these bad situations, because they want to know that there's at least somebody responsible with eyes and ears on the situation. Do they always have technical legal standing? No, but is it good? Yes. Um, and so with grandparent rights, a lot of times that comes down, I hate to say it, but it comes down to politics, where it's like you have to take, sometimes as a grandparent, that very political approach of how am I going to support and foster our relationship with the other parent. Yes, they are our child's ex, but you're kind of the next step up. And if you just sometimes take allegiance with your own child and just reject the other because your child has rejected the other or been rejected by the other, that's going to start damaging your relationships with, half of the kid's time, perhaps, or maybe even more than half of the kid's time.
Right.
And so sometimes you have to, as the grandparent, try to find ways, sooner rather than later, ideally, you start forming your own relationships with everybody in the case, and you try to maintain healthy relationships regardless of what, your child and, their former spouse or, former partner are doing. A lot of times that's really the only recourse, is just how do you keep that door open by showing that other person respect and support. You may not want to, but maybe that's what you have to do in order to try to keep that communication line open.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's a toughie. I mean, it's heartbreaking, for the grandparents, the kids, especially if they've had strong relationships with the kids. And then there's a divorce, and then there's a struggle because, the parents are fighting. There's maybe a narcissistic co-parenting situation going on, and it trickles over onto the grandparents. And,
Right.
and it's really hard, for everybody involved. I think support, support, putting yourself behind the needs of the child, and what's best for the child, I think that's really important, um, which is something you said. All right. Well, this has been extremely informative. Like I said, I think anyone that has not seen his videos and Instagram, he's the unapologetic parenting. What is that? Okay.
Unapologetic parenting.
And unapologetic parenting. Tongue twister.
Exactly.
And he is. And you know what? Follow him, read his books, gain that support, gain that insight. It can only help you, especially if you're living within this narcissistic co-parenting situation. And if you're in Texas, Central Texas, and you need his help, reach out to him, because he's really a wealth of knowledge and a comfort. I think he brings comfort to a very, very stressful situation. So thank you, Carl. I'm gonna continue ending the show, but I will be circling back with you and sending you everything that you need. And thank you again, and thank Leandra, your assistant, who's great.
Absolutely, my pleasure. My pleasure.
All righty, take care.
You too.
Bye bye. All right, there you go. Carl Knickerbocker, attorney at law, dealing with narcissistic co-parenting issues. I'm going to bring on, before we leave, please go also to Amazon and buy Doormat Mom No More book that I wrote. It really will help you also in understanding the estrangement epidemic that's happening in this nation, and how to, join in, find that comfort that you need through my Facebook group and whatnot, but also just realize that you're not alone. And I think that's a big part of being able to navigate through it and work to, find your life again and to heal. So go ahead again, Doormat Mom No More on Amazon. That's it. We are done here. I hope this was informative. It was very informative to me and other parents who are dealing with not only this situation, but many others. And as I said, I look forward to seeing you again. Find Carl Knickerbocker on Amazon. All right. Take care and God bless.